played at high volume.
Eyes, why don't you? Can't you hear me cry, why don't you? Open up your heart, why don't you? Let me be a part, why don't you? Ever come around, why don't you? Never make a sound, why don't you? Give me all your love, why don't you? Move me from above, why don't you? I done heard a lot about you. Question in my heart, I doubt you. Wanna see me now, why don't you? Come and show me how, why don't you? Give me a little time, why don't you? Say what's on your mind, why don't you? Wanna see me live, why don't you? Wanna see me die, why don't you? Think that I would try, why don't you? Show me how to fly, why don't they? Feel you coming nigh, why don't you? Open up the sky, why don't you? Never, not again, I told you. Wonder where I've been, I know you. Got me on my knees, why don't you? Listen to my pleas, why don't you? See. I can see the stars amongst you. I got a lot of scars, why don't you? Take me in your arms, why don't you? Keep me from the harm, why don't you? Tell me I'm the one, why don't you? Let me see your son, why don't you? Give me another chance, why don't you? Have a lot of fans, why don't you? Let me know, why don't you? Really didn't wanna go, why don't you? Come and take me back, why don't you? See that I'm a wreck, why don't you? I've been on my own without you. Trying to find my way without you. Fighting through the night without you. Sleeping through the day, why don't you? Come and be my peace, why don't you? Save me from the streets, why don't you? Show me who would care, I'm holding more than I can bear, why don't you? Take my hand, why don't you? Help me understand, why don't you? Open up my soul so I could recognize your plans, why don't you? Usher in my prayers, why don't you? Take up all my cares, why don't you? Wash away my sin, why don't you? Won't you let me in, why don't you? I don't want a life without you. I can't live my life without you. I won't spend my life without you. I might end my life without you. Does it feel good? Is it right or does it feel good? Does it feel good? Is it right or does it feel good? Does it feel good? Is it right or does it feel good? Is it life or is it temporary? For the night or is it mandatory? Does it feel good? Is it right or does it feel good? Does it feel good? Is it right or does it feel good? Does it feel good? Is it right or does it feel good? Does it feel good? Does it feel good?